안녕하세요. 대한민국 영어감잡기 프로젝트 데미안과 함께하는 너쉬영북 시간입니다. 이번 시간은 11강 리딩입니다. 35쪽 여기 히부터 해요. 자, 읽습니다. He was walking behind me on the way home from school, and after the others had turned off, he caught up with me and said hello. Even his manner of greeting, though he tried to imitate our schoolboy tone, was distinctly adult and polite. Shall we walk together for a while? He asked. I felt flattered and nodded. Then I described to him where I lived. Oh, over there, he said and smiled. I know the house. There's something odd about the doorway. It interested me at once. I didn't know offhand what he meant and was astonished that he apparently knew our house better than I did myself. The keystone of the arch above the doorway bore no doubt a kind of a coat of arms, but it had worn off with time and had frequently been painted over. As far as I know, it had nothing to do with us and our family. I don't know anything about it, I said shyly. It's a bird or something like that, and must be quite old. The house is supposed to have been part of the monastery at one point. That's quite possible, he nodded. Take a good look at it sometime. Such tilings can be quite interesting. I believe it's a sparrowhawk. We walked on. I felt very self-conscious. Suddenly, Demian laughed as though something had struck him as funny. Yes, when we had the class together, he burst out. The story of Cain who has that mark on his forehead. Do you like it? No, I didn't. It was rare for me to like anything we had to learn. Yet I didn't dare confess it, for I felt I was being addressed by an adult. I said I didn't much mind the story. Demian slapped me on the back. You don't have to put on an act for me. But in fact, the story is quite remarkable. It is far more remarkable than most stories we are taught in school. Your teacher didn't go into it at great length. He just mentioned the usual things about God and sin and so forth. So I believe, he interrupted himself and asked with a smile, does this interest you at all? Well, I think, he went on, one can give this story about Cain quite a different interpretation. Most of the things we are taught, I'm sure, are quite right and true, but one can view all of them from quite a different angle than the teachers do. And most of the time, they then make better sense. For instance, one can be quite satisfied with this Cain and the mark on his forehead, with the way it's explained to us. Don't you agree? It's perfectly possible for someone to kill his brother with a stone and to panic and repent. But that he is awarded a special decoration for his cowardice, a mark that protects him and puts the fear of God into all the others. That's quite odd, isn't it? Of course, I said with interest. The idea began to fascinate me. But what other way of interpreting the story is there? He slapped me on the shoulder. It's quite simple. The first element of the story, its actual beginning, was the mark. Here was a man with something in his face that frightened the others. They didn't dare lay hands on him. He impressed them, he and his children. We can guess, no, we can be quite certain, that it was not a mark on his forehead like a postmark. Life is hardly ever as clear and straightforward as that. It's much more likely that he struck people as faintly sinister, perhaps a little more intellect and boldness in his look than people were used to. This man was powerful. You'd approach him only with awe. He had a sign. You could explain this any way you wished. And people always want what is agreeable to them and push them in the right. They were afraid of Cain's children. They bore a sign, so they did not interpret the sign for what it was, a mark of distinction, but as its opposite. They said, "Those fellows with the sign, they are a strange lot." And indeed they were. People with courage and character always seem sinister to the rest. It was a scandal that a breed of fearless and sinister people ran about freely. So they attached a nickname and a myth to these people to get even with them, to make up for the many times they had felt afraid. Do you get it? Yes, that is, in that case, Cain wouldn't have been evil at all. And the whole story in the Bible is actually not authentic. Yes and no. Such age-old stories are always true, but they aren't always properly recorded and aren't always given correct interpretations. In short, I mean, Cain was a fine fellow, and this story was pinned on him only because the people were afraid. The story was simply a rumor, something that people gave about. And it was true insofar as Cain and his children really bore a kind of mark and were different from most people. I was astounded. 자, 오늘은 여기까지네요. 오늘 영상이 여러분이 영어의 감을 잡는 데 도움이 된다면 구독, 좋아요로 알려주세요. 더 좋은 영상을 만드는 데 큰 힘이 될 것입니다. 여러분 감사합니다.